Thanks for tuning in to the 8th episode of the Aural Literature podcast series. Aural Literature is a public reading program held on the last Wednesday of each month at the Terrazas branch of Austin Public Library. This podcast series serves as another medium for local writers to share their work with the public. In this episode, we will hear work from Logan and Caroline Gormley. Caroline is a poet based in Austin, Texas. She edits the journal Phagon alongside Logan and Matt Moore. She is a graduate of Pratt Institute's writing program and received her MFA from Brooklyn College. Caroline's chapbook, This Pose Can Be Held for Only So Long, was published by the Corresponding Society. Logan is a poet and teacher who lives in Austin. He edits the journal Phagon, and his poetry can be found in publications including the Boston Review, Fence, and Best American Experimental Writing. Both Logan and Caroline have previously read at the Aural Literature program, and both are featured in the Aural Literature anthology book published by Austin Public Library late last year. Before we listen to Logan and Caroline read their poetry, this episode of the Aural Literature podcast series begins with an interview. Paul, do you mind talking about your experience at public readings and writing workshops and what it means for you to read publicly?
I think what's really interesting to me about oral literature is where it happens in a library, in a public library, which is such an accessible sort of, it's available to anybody. Any person can wander in and maybe not even mean to witness or participate in a poetry reading and stumble upon it. I used to live in New York City before I moved to Austin, and I hosted a reading series there because my friend Gabe Cruz and I, who started the reading series, thought, we go to all of these traditional reading series that happen in kind of uncomfortable places where you feel weird if you have to clear your throat or you're the only person laughing at a line of poetry and then you're like, oh wow, I'm dumb. And we kind of built this idea of a reading series that is the opposite of everything like that. A place where people could come and have fun and look forward to the next one and make new friends. And it happened in the complete opposite of a public library. It happened in a dive bar that happened to have a stage and a PA, so they let us do a poetry reading there. It's Tip Top in Bed-Stuy, and I love that place. It's a great community bar, and people would come in not knowing anything about poetry, join in our audience, and have a really great time and want to share their poetry with us. So that was really cool. I really liked being a part of a community like that. And I think more poetry should happen in a variety of spaces, not just the traditional venues that you see.
Can you give us a little history about the Phagon journal?
Sure. Yeah. Phagon started, I guess, about 5 years ago when I was in the MFA program at the University of Texas, and a friend of mine there, Matt Moore, and I began it sort of out of a desire to sort of see. We kind of began it out of a desire to work against some of the forces that we saw in the poetry community that, and kind of our culture at large, most broadly, as this anti-intellectual sensibility or an approach. A lot of our favorite poets and journals seem to operate kind of on the margins, even within a writing program. And so we really wanted to initiate a platform in which we can assert a type of writing that kind of works against some of those ideas that are kind of diminishing or degrading elements of kind of a rigorous engagement with the world and communities and so forth.
Can you also just tell us about Flag and Void itself to people that aren't familiar with it, and just kind of explain what it is and how often it's available?
Yeah, Flag and Void, so it's in its 5th year now, and it exists pretty much solely online. We did publish one sort of print issue. Our second was a kind of postcard series, and we still perhaps will continue down that road in the future. But we publish predominantly poetry, or what could be loosely categorized as poetry, and do so. It's not a really set schedule that we're working on. It kind of depends on the work that we're getting. We publish generally 1 to 2 issues online a year since we've been out, and we arrange the issues based on what's coming into us, and try to do them around some unifying sensibility. There's no explicit theme to the issues, but we take a look at the work that's coming in, and sometimes we'll accept 2 pieces, say, in August, and we'll decide that, well, this set of work really lends itself to these other pieces that are coming out in our next issue, but this one that we accepted in the same time frame, we're going to save for later and maybe use as kind of the foundation of another issue that we can kind of build and construct around the ideas and the sensibilities and the aesthetic that's present there.
How do you see the future of Flag and Void headed, or where is the future of Flag and Void headed in 2017?
That's a really good question, actually, because we found that the 3 editors, we've been having a really hard time of sort of moving forward with the progress of it. We're definitely dedicated to do so, and will continue, but just sort of in recent months, we were all sort of ready to put out our 9th volume online, and things kind of ground to a halt. And I think it's had us sort of a little conflictedness with the state of poetry. I know that Caroline we've been talking about that recently, and that's something that you've been feeling.
Yeah, I mean, the militant neoliberalism that's at the heart of a lot of the contemporary poetry landscape, kind of tinged with the sort of white supremacy that's at the core of conceptualism, and the complete failure and inability of people who are at the core of these movements to stand up and appropriately respond to the times when they are rightfully called out. Really made me kind of disillusioned with poetry. I haven't been writing as much in recent years because of that. I don't know. I sometimes say I'm a retired poet because of it, but I also realize as an editor, I have power within what we do at Flag and Void and like-minded journals to resist those modes and kind of present a new way of approaching it.
Yeah, I think going forward, it's just approaching it with even more mindfulness of the role that we have. That even if we are just a website, that at this point in time, I mean, to create a publication, you really just have to have the desire to do so and a domain name. And so I think that's great as far as really democratizing and spreading out for like diverse sources of like conduits for sites of writing and thinking. But I think it also means that you can kind of easily enter into something and not have it be as defined as it maybe ought to be. And I think so what's been happening in our country and the world has sort of been spurring us into a mode of kind of reassessing those values and figuring out how to externalize them on the platform that we have. I think that the issue that we do have that in the works does address a lot of these kind of concerns and will be a good sort of starting place again for those ideas to be put back into motion once we end up getting it out, hopefully this spring. So there's a more helpful element looking toward the future. So the future, I think, of Flag and Void kind of begins anew, starting with this issue that we have in the works and looking to really be kind of mindful of our roles as kind of these quote unquote gatekeepers and our position in the poetry landscape as such.
Can you talk a little bit about the meaning of the name Flag and Void?
Yeah, it's a name that it came about, through the process. I don't know, the way that maybe some people go about coming up with a band name or something, of just writing sort of words on a sheet of paper. But it really didn't take that many of them until Matt and I kind of hit on these two words. And it also, Caroline talked a little about the ways that this idea of, our tagline, a journal of rigorous poetry, can be kind of almost, not quite sneered at, but there's a little bit of an eye roll that can be built into that sort of idea from some people that have encountered it. I think in similar ways, the name Flag and Void has created some misunderstandings. Like, I remember pretty early on getting a single poem from a writer who, it was about the American flag, and it was written in a very rigid, doggerel form. And when we rejected it politely, the poet was very upset and saying that, well, we don't know what our journal is all about if we think that poem isn't in line with it. So when we think of Flag and Void, the flag portion certainly is not meant to be the American flag or any nation's flag at all, and not even really a sense of nationalism, but more to kind of represent a site for this inquiry, a site for one to map their aesthetic principles and to kind of uphold them in a way that has that sense of accuracy and insight and sort of sense of internal justification of the work, right? So taking the artistic impulse, which maybe is the void portion of it, and one that is formless, shapeless, the idea of it meaning to be inclusive and a sort of diverse source, but that's sort of from the void, being able to kind of stitch the flag of your aesthetic principles and sensibilities and impulses into something that is defined, but defined individually from that sense.
This concludes the interview portion of the episode. Let's now listen to poetry from Caroline and Logan.
My name is Caroline Gormley. and I'm going to read poems from Pink Lake. Is when light filled the corner of his room from the door to the sound of the hive, hearing movement of little legs in the afternoons and in the early mornings, he'd miss their fuzzy legs rubbing against themselves? Or were these mornings spent just so not as rare as he once felt her face with his whole hand, the jarring yaw of time misplaced, of whatever elapses? We no longer live here. Haze emits a sound like the I swear to God brick red light you emit. Babe, I will hold you down. Boo, I will ruin whatever the light touches, can't shake the bovine eyes staring back from the fields in, what was it, Iowa? Hurt built what you see, this Riviera of pain, of really poor life choices, or one's way back to a time when hurt evokes something of value. Is the atmosphere just right for you, baby? It built itself and continues to do so as long as this kiln stays lit. Sat with her in the shade, talking about mystic powers attributed to gems, and that's when things got meta, she said. Rad, she said. Ick. Losing has a shade. It is a red feeling. Or maybe I am an idiot for feeling color so hard. Seeing loss through my eyelids in the morning bright as hell, not to say, I told you so. Go away, God. I strongly believe everybody deserves to have "you are a cutie" slip into their DMs. Quiet mornings spent with hurt people complement the pictures I post of my tomb. This year I got real into collecting hand-drawn maps. They don't lead to places, at least not in that sense. Rank the top 19 times you totally wanted to die. Ghoulish whims control my mom. I don't know, man. Don't you pull rank with me, pal. I lost the key to the car full of rifles a long time ago now. Quiet is all I ask during the pelvic exam, thinking, well, Gormley, you've done it this time. In the wrong ward again. Please would you shut the door? What were you, raised in a barn? I'm comfy with swallowing, yes, even sometimes my pride, getting a condom fished out at ye old Planned Parenthood. They can't see me till noon, and I feel the descent starting to think maybe I'll never change, find some sacred space in this world and ruin it. Anyway, I bought a wig explicitly for sex. It's been on my floor for 3 weeks now, starting to be a bit of an eyesore. Screw it, I say, and buy another. Shot of whiskey, the sound of me puking 4 hours from now, an ode to poor impulse control. Sorry for ruining your grandma's quilt. I just need a little more sleep. Be careful, the sidewalks are all ice out there this morning. Trees are old as heck and alive and okay with solitude. I forget all the time. Want to play a game with me? See, it's called I Hate Everything I Am and Do. Don't like it? Sue me. Love is not the absence of hate, and thanks for the concern trolling, but here's a hint. Sit backwards on the toilet to fully void your bladder. Life hack. The signs at the zoo depress me so much. Like, for some reason, enough people need to be told not to yell at the animals. Since my cat is too small, he doesn't eat me. Hobbies include brooding. It's the result of too much quiet when I start to hear teens laughing outside my window, hit me up for a to be honest. Still vexes me. You try being patient with kids when all they do is stand around your bed chanting everybody dies someday. And then on a completely different note, this is a poem that I wrote, I think 11 years ago. So it's probably embarrassing to a certain degree. But I wanted to revisit it. I've been thinking about the concepts behind it a lot recently. And if it's really bad, you can just edit it out. Victory of Samothrace. Speaking can sometimes be the most violent act between two people. Like the time you opened your mouth and my arms fell off. It was strange because you opened your mouth and my arms fell off, and we were not dreaming, or I was not asleep. There was that time in France when the front was drawing nearer and they had to empty the museums. And Winged Victory was inched down the steps from her throne, wings trembling as if each 1,000 particle were a threat. Men wept, thinking, surely we will never see her again. And then there's you at the end of the hall, dark in between, but behind you there is light, suffusive and warm like memory. Or there's you, 5 hours in the future, riding buses over bridges that are older than my city. Or there's you, airport crowds parting to your back turned. Or you, the creases in your palm, folding into mine like so. Greece never found her head, never found her arms. Scholars say maybe she was holding a trumpet to her mouth, shouting victory. I can't see anything but the wings trembling.
My name is Logan Fry, and I'm going to now read a few poems. Tome. There are more books than can be read, but not more than can be bought. Is this the way that capital slays? No, I think it's words' grand armor. Memory wound. That's the gap that the past has pulled blood through. That's filial, the prince's jokes splayed in the harp's croon. Being glossy from a hung bit's haltered for youth. In Nuce the plaster got wet again. Good look, say the dead. Let the debtors in. Polite knives wit own purses that I worsened, as what Kant's hymns missed, they left in stitches. Where to equip the snitches? I get it. Warsaw I saw an image a time. War's what I saw. Under whose flag can I limping slip this memo? I get it. Your hustle don't ever go unnoticed, baby. I'm with you. I'm with it. The grand credit ledger takes water, says thank you, resumes its conversation. Think piece workshopping, cryptocurrency in the figure of the 20th century comedy director. It's a working title. It is in debate. Whether to swap father in, the utility of it. It is a teachable generational moment. It is decided. It is parched. It's these meds. It looks beyond the window and the many passing windows beyond it. It's a time-bound pose it holds. The composing ledger enfolds. Beauty's foot incurs synchronicity and the nuisance of blather, arty pillows arranged tall by the broker, coffees, yes coffees, set out and around. It's so gauche, only cousins will come. It's how it wants it. I cast off the cloud I broke in twain. Out of its memory's ethos a datum tumbles. It's encrypted. This, among others, is a benefit of slang. Wet, through billows where, once, forestry built lives' facets, the pragmatist dune buggy hurdles. Its driver is buoyant. She sputters at towers districts fell about, considers the net credit civilians led on, the glass fondant so gleamy, so ultimately a public works, the whole project of debt. How, to have slain what one's slewn is another benefit of slaying. The ridges on beauty's foot accidentally enfold the dead clouds. wherein there are gardens. To till them's how data is found. In the list of public goods is the prince's joke, and is Kant's paltry sewing, and is the pedant's tire swing. Is the nuptials trick knee, and debt's gay think piece, and is the loyalist's id, and is Galileo's wet red bow. The way out of a memory wound is to wound you. It's the absence of lack I push data through. Color too. Pain's litany's form is the feedback loop, which hoops your plangents, a bust of hastening, and which leaps against doing, the seawall of it. Being heaps beside it. There are a few still loose piles where the data-logged bodies drift. Concordance. Is the need of words what set the Nate Punch joking westerly? Who has musty text to import lust with? Who farther conning that isthmus labors? Who dressage gets in blunders, trial horse he abets with, dosing particulate heartword, adoring what's dull, because a question bullies most people. But does he care? He has answers prepared for such occasion, that what lopes is a wounded character, and that who rises from the synthetic shrubs, rifle tip ungassing, and looks pleased, must contend with the grasses trounced afoot, and find it good, or find it at least fine, that to live is just greed, if greed can ever be just. Judging a dark roof's angle. Orange can be softer theorem, if a wet cant is taken upon it, further upon a cast air left red, Goethe follow yellow reason, nails won't rut in that note I posted, affixed with the torque your litmus had, however gifted. Apparatus. I was taught to frag then surplus. I prime some flaw to gain with it a forge. I huff a tent, then flex to hustle some hard trusts up. I have to come with you once more. A form conjures itself, decides that it is red. For instance, helots are the fleshy part that voids count as their fruit. The accident of flavor merely proves a serf has wished. So wishing isn't cause I fell unkindly, knowing forts hewn from the stooped lean easy. When delay of cause wins an end, I finish glad. I so rest that way.